In Maple Ridge neighborhood at 3:20 p.m., Rachel, K9, Thompson was walking Mrs. Patterson's 7-year-old golden retriever Buddy on their daily walk. As they passed by Sunny Acres Park, the usually calm and friendly Buddy suddenly stopped. Rachel immediately noticed the change. Buddy's body language had completely transformed. His hackles raised, ears pinned back, and a low, threatening growl came from his throat. Rachel's eyes followed Buddy's line of sight and saw the man standing near the children's playground. The man was wearing jogging outfit, approximately 40 years old, with a professional camera in his hand. To a casual observer, he looked like a normal jogger taking pictures while exercising. But Rachel Thompson wasn't a casual observer. She was a former U.S. Army Military Police K-9 unit specialist who had worked for 15 years, trained working dogs in battlefields, and made reading dog behavior a matter of survival. Buddy's body language was giving Rachel a clear message. Alert posture, extreme awareness, pinned ears, threat assessment, low growl, warning signal, direct stare, target acquired. This combination was a specific threat indicator Rachel knew from her military experience. Dogs could identify predators, pheromones, body language subtleties, behavioral patterns that humans couldn't detect, dogs could sense. Rachel quietly observed Buddy, tail rigid, weight shifted forward, muscles tensed. Textbook predator alert. The man was casually photographing children in the playground, but the lens direction, focus pattern, and positioning were surveillance behavior Rachel had seen in her military training. Rachel's heart raced. For 6 years, she had worked as a professional dog walker in Maple Ridge, knew every family living in this neighborhood, protected every child, lived a peaceful civilian life. But this man, and Buddy's reaction, reminded Rachel that her 15 years of military training never truly ended. Dogs always knew first. And Rachel, K9, Thompson trusted her four-legged intelligence network more than any surveillance system. Parents and pet owners, this one's for you. Subscribe if you want to learn how everyday community members can be your children's secret protectors. Rachel's story shows how military veterans blend seamlessly into civilian life while still serving and protecting. Who in your neighborhood might be a hidden guardian? Like and share to honor all the quiet heroes keeping our communities safe. For 6 years, Rachel Thompson had been living the perfect cover life as Maple Ridge's most trusted dog walker. She knew every pet, every family, every routine in the upscale suburban neighborhood. Parents felt secure leaving their beloved dogs in her care. Children waved excitedly when they saw her walking their pets. What none of them knew was that Rachel had transformed their neighborhood into the most sophisticated civilian surveillance network in the county, using skills learned during 15 years as an Army Military Police K-9 specialist. Her route wasn't random, it was a carefully planned patrol pattern that provided optimal coverage of schools, parks, playgrounds, and residential areas where children gathered. Her client list wasn't just about pet care, it was intelligence gathering from families who trusted her completely with access to their homes, schedules, and personal information. Most importantly, the dogs she walked weren't just pets, they were an early warning system trained to detect threats using techniques Rachel had perfected in military working dog operations. After Buddy's alert at Sunny Acres Park, Rachel began implementing protocols she hadn't used since her deployment in Afghanistan. She started documenting patterns, behaviors, and anomalies that would be invisible to civilian observation but critical for threat assessment. The man with the camera appeared 3 times per week, always during school dismissal hours. Always positioned where he could photograph children without appearing suspicious. Always carrying professional equipment that suggested purposes beyond casual photography. But Rachel's most important intelligence came from the dogs themselves. Over the next 2 weeks, she noticed that every dog she walked showed stress responses to the same individual, elevated heart rate, protective positioning, alert behavior, and the distinctive low growl that indicated predator recognition. Rachel's military training had taught her that working dogs could detect threats through sensory capabilities that far exceeded human awareness. Chemical signatures, behavioral patterns, and subtle environmental changes that indicated danger. The neighborhood dogs were telling her that someone was hunting their family's children. Rachel's approach to the threat was methodical and professional, drawing upon training that had kept military personnel alive in combat zones worldwide. She began conducting tactical surveillance disguised as routine dog walking, documenting the suspect's patterns, behaviors, and activities with the precision of a military intelligence operation. Her observations revealed disturbing details. The man had been photographing the same children repeatedly, focusing on their daily routines, transportation methods, and times when they were most vulnerable. He had maps of the neighborhood in his vehicle and communication equipment that suggested coordination with others. Rachel's military experience told her this wasn't opportunistic predator behavior, this was organized, planned, and systematic targeting of specific families. Using her K-9 training, Rachel began teaching the neighborhood dogs enhanced alert behaviors that would notify her of the suspect's presence even when she wasn't physically present. The dogs learned to recognize his scent, his voice, and his movement patterns. She also started building intelligence files on every family in her service area, identifying which children might be primary targets based on family schedules, security measures, and accessibility. Rachel's cover as a dog walker gave her unprecedented access to information that law enforcement couldn't obtain without search warrants, family routines, home security systems, children's schedules, and most importantly, the trust of parents who shared everything with their beloved pet care provider. But Rachel's most valuable asset was her network of K-9 early warning systems positioned throughout the neighborhood, trained to detect and alert on threats using military working dog techniques. Rachel's worst fears were confirmed when 8-year-old Katie Morrison from Elm Street disappeared during her walk home from school. Katie's family dog, a border collie named Scout that Rachel walked daily, had been showing extreme agitation for 3 days before the abduction. Rachel realized that Scout had been trying to warn her that Katie was in immediate danger, but she had misread the intensity of the dog's alerts. Katie was found 6 hours later, physically unharmed but traumatized, abandoned in a park 3 miles away. The investigation revealed that she had been taken by someone who knew her routine, her route home from school, and her family's schedule. Rachel understood that her intelligence gathering and surveillance had not been sufficient to prevent the attack. The predator had escalated from observation to action, and her passive monitoring approach had failed to protect an innocent child. That night, Rachel made the decision that would transform her from covert observer to active protector. She activated emergency protocols that would reveal her military background but potentially save other children from Katie's experience. Rachel contacted her former commanding officer at Fort Bragg, explaining the situation and requesting permission to implement active countermeasures against the threat. "Thompson, you're a civilian now," Colonel Martinez reminded her. "You can't conduct military operations against American citizens." "Sir, with respect, I'm not requesting permission to conduct military operations. I'm requesting guidance on protecting civilian children using skills learned in military service." After a long pause, Colonel Martinez responded, "Thompson, you have my unofficial support for any actions necessary to protect those children. But understand, you're operating without military authority or legal protection." Rachel understood the implications. She was about to risk her civilian life, her business, and potentially her freedom to protect children whose parents trusted her with their pets. But her military oath had never expired: protect innocent lives against all threats, foreign and domestic. Rachel's transformation from passive observer to active protector was swift and comprehensive. Using her military training and K-9 expertise, she began implementing countermeasures that would have impressed special operations commanders. Her first action was to enhance the capabilities of her K-9 intelligence network. Rachel trained the neighborhood dogs in advanced alert behaviors that would provide real-time surveillance coverage of the entire area where children were most vulnerable. Each dog learned specific signals for different types of threats. Unknown adults near schools, vehicles following children, individuals attempting to establish contact with minors, and most importantly, the scent and behavior patterns of the primary suspect. Rachel also began coordinating with other dog walkers and pet owners in surrounding neighborhoods, creating an informal but effective civilian surveillance network that covered a much larger area than she could monitor alone. Her intelligence gathering expanded to include detailed behavioral analysis of the suspect, pattern recognition that would predict his movements, and most importantly, identification of other individuals who might be part of an organized operation. Rachel's military training had taught her that predators rarely operated in complete isolation. There were usually support networks, communication systems, and coordinated activities that could be identified and disrupted. Using surveillance techniques learned in military intelligence operations, Rachel began documenting evidence that could be provided to law enforcement while maintaining her civilian cover. But her most important innovation was the development of rapid response protocols that would allow immediate intervention if another child was threatened. Rachel positioned herself and her canine partners throughout the neighborhood during high-risk times, creating overlapping coverage that would detect and respond to threats within minutes of their emergence. The confrontation came 3 weeks after Katie Morrison's abduction, when Rachel's canine network detected the suspect approaching Riverside Elementary School during afternoon dismissal. Scout and 2 other dogs in Rachel's network began displaying extreme alert behaviors, indicating that the threat level had escalated beyond observation to immediate action. Rachel's training told her that the suspect was positioning himself for another abduction attempt, and this time she was prepared to intervene directly. Using hand signals learned in military canine operations, Rachel coordinated her canine partners to surround the suspect while maintaining the appearance of routine dog walking activities. The dog's positioning created a tactical situation that would prevent the suspect from approaching children while providing Rachel with multiple options for response based on his actions. When the suspect attempted to approach 9-year-old Amanda Chen, no relation to Emma from earlier stories, Scout moved into protective position while Rachel, accidentally, encountered the suspect during her routine walk. "Excuse me," Rachel said with the friendly smile that had made her the neighborhood's most trusted dog walker, "I couldn't help but notice you've been watching the children. Are you waiting for someone specific?" The suspect's response confirmed Rachel's assessment: nervous behavior, defensive posturing, and most importantly, the immediate recognition of threat that Scout and the other dogs displayed through their alert behaviors. "Just enjoying the fresh air," the suspect replied, but his body language and the dog's reactions told Rachel everything she needed to know about his true intentions. Rachel's military training allowed her to assess the threat level, identify the optimal response, and implement action that would protect the children while gathering evidence for law enforcement. What followed was a textbook demonstration of how civilian cover could be used to conduct intelligence gathering and threat neutralization without revealing military capabilities or compromising ongoing operations. The suspect's apprehension revealed the scope of the threat that Rachel's K-9 network had been tracking for months. He was part of an organized operation that had been targeting children in multiple neighborhoods across 3 counties. FBI agents who responded to Rachel's intelligence briefing were amazed by the comprehensiveness of her surveillance data and the effectiveness of her canine early warning system. Mrs. Thompson, Special Agent Sarah Williams said, "Your documentation is more thorough than most professional law enforcement investigations. What's your background?" Rachel looked around at the neighborhood where she had spent 6 years building trust, relationships, and the most effective civilian protection network in the region. "Agent Williams, I'm a professional dog walker who cares about the safety of the children and families I serve. I may have some relevant experience from previous employment." "What kind of previous employment?" Rachel made her decision with the same tactical clarity that had guided her military career. 15 years, Army Military Police K-9 Unit. Specialized in working dog operations, threat detection, and civilian protection in combat environments. Agent Williams understood immediately. "You've been running a counterintelligence operation disguised as a pet care business." "I've been protecting my community using skills learned in military service," Rachel corrected. "The dogs just happened to be excellent partners for that mission." The investigation that followed revealed that Rachel's K-9 network had prevented at least 3 additional abduction attempts, identified multiple suspects in the organized operation, and provided law enforcement with intelligence that led to arrests in several states. But more importantly, Rachel had demonstrated that military skills could be successfully adapted to civilian community protection without compromising the trust and relationships that made her effective. 6 months after the arrest of the Predator Network, Rachel Thompson continued her work as Maple Ridge's most trusted dog walker, but her role had evolved far beyond pet care. Parents throughout the neighborhood now understood that their dog walker was also their children's guardian, someone with the training and dedication to protect their families from threats they might never see coming. Rachel had been approached by law enforcement agencies about formalizing her role as a civilian intelligence asset, but she had declined official positions in favor of continuing her community-based protection work. The most effective security is invisible security, Rachel explained to FBI agent Williams during a follow-up interview. The moment I become an official law enforcement presence, I lose the trust and access that makes this network effective. Rachel had also been invited to train other civilian protection networks in different communities, sharing her expertise in K-9 operations and civilian surveillance techniques. But her most important work remained unchanged: walking dogs, building relationships, and maintaining the early warning system that kept Maple Ridge's children safe from predators. Mrs. Thompson asked 9-year-old Amanda Chen during one of her family's visits to thank Rachel, "How did you know that bad man was dangerous?" Rachel knelt down to Amanda's eye level while Scout sat beside her in the protective position that had become second nature. "Amanda, dogs are very smart about people. They can tell when someone has good intentions and when someone might want to hurt children. I just learned how to listen to what the dogs were trying to tell me. Will you teach me how to listen to dogs too?" Rachel smiled, thinking about the next generation of children who would grow up understanding that their community had guardians who would always protect them. "Amanda, the most important thing is to trust the adults who care about you and to pay attention when dogs or other people try to warn you about someone who doesn't feel safe." 2 years later, Rachel Thompson had become a consultant for community protection programs throughout the region, but her primary identity remained unchanged: the beloved dog walker of Maple Ridge neighborhood. Her K-9 network had evolved into a comprehensive community safety program that trained pet owners, dog walkers, and other service providers to recognize and report threats to children. The program, known as Guardian Paws, had been implemented in over 30 communities, providing enhanced protection for thousands of families while maintaining the civilian, community-based approach that made it effective. Rachel's story had inspired other military veterans working in civilian service positions to recognize that their skills could be adapted to community protection without compromising their new careers or revealing their military backgrounds. But Rachel's most important legacy was the simple truth that effective community protection came from people who cared about their neighbors and were willing to use whatever skills they possessed to keep children safe. Mrs. Thompson asked Mrs. Patterson during one of their routine check-ins about Buddy's care, "I've always wondered, how did you become so good at understanding dog behavior?" Rachel smiled as she watched Buddy playing happily in the backyard, no longer showing the alert behaviors that had once warned of danger in their neighborhood. "Mrs. Patterson, I've learned that dogs and people aren't that different. They both want to feel safe, they both want to protect the people they love, and they both can sense when someone around them has good or bad intentions." "And you learned that just from walking dogs?" Rachel considered the question, thinking about the journey that had brought her from military K-9 operations to civilian community protection. "I learned it from spending time with dogs and people who trusted me to keep them safe. Everything else just came from wanting to be worthy of that trust." 5 years after the Predator Network's arrest, Rachel Thompson continued her morning routine in Maple Ridge neighborhood, but now she walked with a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond successful pet care. The Guardian Paws program she had developed was protecting children in hundreds of communities across the country. Military veterans working in civilian service roles had found new ways to serve their communities. Law enforcement agencies had learned to recognize and utilize the civilian protection networks that operated in every neighborhood. But Rachel's greatest satisfaction came from the simple daily reality that children in her community played safely, walked to school confidently, and grew up knowing that they were protected by people who cared about them. "Rachel," called out Katie Morrison, now 13 and walking to middle school, "thanks for taking such good care of Rex. He always comes home happy after his walks with you." Rachel waved back, watching Katie walk confidently down the street that had once been dangerous for her and other children. Some soldiers serve their country on foreign battlefields, protecting abstract concepts of freedom and democracy. Others serve by protecting the concrete, personal safety of children in their own communities, using skills learned in military service to create the peaceful, secure neighborhoods where democracy can flourish. Rachel, K-9, Thompson had discovered that both forms of service required the same qualities: vigilance, dedication, tactical thinking, and most importantly, the understanding that the most important battles are fought not for territory or ideology, but for the safety and well-being of innocent people who trust you to protect them. The greatest victory wasn't defeating the Predator network or developing the Guardian Pause program. It was the continuing trust of families who knew that when their children played outside or walked to school, someone was watching over them with the skills, experience, and unshakable commitment of a person who had dedicated her life to protecting others. Every morning, as Rachel leashed up the dogs for their daily patrol of Maple Ridge neighborhood, she remembered the lesson that had defined both her military and civilian careers: the most effective protection is provided by people who care deeply about those they serve, who understand that service never ends, and who are willing to adapt their skills to meet whatever challenges threaten the communities they love. In Rachel's case, that service meant ensuring that every child in Maple Ridge could grow up with the confidence and security that comes from knowing they were protected by someone who would never stop watching over them, never stop caring about their safety, and never stop using every skill in her possession to make sure they could live the innocent, joyful lives that every child deserved. Because some guardians wear uniforms and carry badges. Others carry leashes and walk dogs, building trust and relationships that create the strongest possible foundation for community safety, neighbors who care about each other and will do whatever it takes to keep each other safe.